All right, well, this is in between the pond build video. I did part one, and then I've got kind of, I guess yesterday was part two, because essentially we're gonna be delayed for probably 2 days. We got probably about 1.5 inches of rain, at least locally. Water out in the pasture. The job site too is pretty wet, you know, it's all that fresh dirt. So we're gonna let it dry tomorrow. No rain for the next week, basically. Let it dry, and then we're gonna head back Thursday, Friday. We should be able to wrap it up, I think, still Friday. Pretty sure. So I thought I'd do something different today, though. I've been receiving some questions, so I appreciate those. I've submitted some questions, both on YouTube and also through like Facebook. So it's kind of dual questions, but a little bit about kind of like excavation and, you know, how I got started into it and that kind of thing. So I figured I'd just kind of set you down by the wood miser, and I figured I'd just answer a few of the questions. So I'll set you down here and we'll go through them. All right, like I said, I got some Q&A questions, so I figured I'd jump in here and talk about them. So the first one is, how did you get started in excavation? So I answered this, and I'll tag the original video, like I think it's on my Bojanowski page, or it might be on this one, I think, Bojanowski Excavation, but where did it start? Well, I mean, it really started, and I'll be honest, I'm 47 years old, so, you know, call it 40 years ago. My family, we moved to like a small little hobby farm. I think I was around 8, maybe 4 or 39 years, whatever, but we moved to a little hobby farm, and so essentially we had tractors, we had livestock, nothing crazy big or anything, but it was a little hobby farm. But like, I learned how to grade the driveway, put in fence posts. We had a mule in the backyard for a while, so that was interesting. At a creek, clean out the creek a lot. So I learned how to get on machines and back then, you know, a lot of people probably my age, you know, similar backgrounds, you know, not so much like my girls. They aren't really into that so much. But that's kind of how it was back then, you know, in the mid 80s. That kind of ties into the next portion. So, you know, how did I get started in excavation? And I guess I think that's more tailored to the business that I run today. I mean, it all started back then, you know, and then eventually, you know, I was doing some grading work, some driveway work, some drainage work. I got my own equipment down the road, and eventually I got like a backhoe, and I was running a backhoe for a while. And the wheels started turning, you know, long time ago, but I always thought it was kind of a pipe dream, right? You know, I didn't know anybody that had like any heavy equipment, like dozers. And I thought, well, I don't know if that'll ever be a thing for me. And then, fast forward, I was trying to do this in one take, but my wife and daughter just got home, so I figured I probably should go say hi. So I don't know where I really left off, probably rambling something, but essentially, I was able to start acquiring my own equipment, and probably, I don't know, probably 5 years ago, the wheels really started turning. Like, okay, this could possibly play out. And then fast forward 3 years ago, I got a excavator, and that was kind of what really jump started it. I actually filed for my LLC July of 2022, and I started doing some side business and stuff like that. And I decided, talking to my wife, of course, you know, like, hey, this is something I want to get a run at. I think this is something I can do. You know, and so that's kind of where it went. And so a lot of this is the same thing you hear, at least that part of it, in that video tag from like, who's Bojanowski Excavation? Because that's ultimately, yes, this is on Ohio dirt, but I run a excavation business. And so obviously, well, you guys figured that out. So anyway, I kind of answered that one. How did you know this was a career choice for you? So I already answered that one a little bit. So what's the biggest? All right. So what is the biggest learning opportunity so far as a fairly new business owner for excavation that you could share with us? So I thought about this for a minute. You know, there's obviously the obvious things like, you know, doing something wrong in a job and fixing that kind of thing. But I actually thought about it a little bit differently. Because I found myself having to constantly challenge myself to do different things or new things. And so I came up with calculated risk. And what that means to me, at least, is being okay with taking on kind of that new job or the new project that you might have never completely have done. But you know you're capable, you have the equipment, you have the knowledge, or at least generally the knowledge, and talking with the customer like, hey, you know, I am confident in this job, you know, own any mistakes that you might make, and learn from the project. And I think just be open and upfront. You know, some would say, well, just lie or whatever and tell them you've done this 100 times. Well, you know, maybe that's how it works for you. But for me, it's just been honest. Like, hey, you know, I built my first pond, I think, 2 years ago. So to that point, I hadn't actually built a pond before. So that customer, I told him, like, look, I hadn't actually done a pond to this scale. I've done small retention ponds and things like that. But like, hey, you know, you're the first customer that I'm going to do an official pond for. Here's how I'm going to build it, and, you know, line out all the things you're going to do, and just be honest with them. And so I think taking that calculated risk that you believe in yourself, you know you can do it, and what could happen if it fails? You know, what's the worst thing that could happen? So that risk piece, you know, there is some risk. Okay, pond couldn't hold water or something. You know, what's that? You know, so thinking through that all the way through. And then try to mitigate that risk as best you can, and be upfront with the customer that you're working for, and, you know, and just follow through if there's anything that doesn't play out exactly like it should. So I think that'd be my, and I'm not, you know, I am by no means far enough along in my business to say I'm successful. I'm still learning every single day, you know, but I think ultimately that has been helpful. And that leads on kind of the next question, you know, what's the key to retaining customers? Because I do a lot of repeat business. You might see some of the videos. A lot of my customers are the same customers, or, you know, I've got new ones, of course. And I think for me, it's the honesty and upfront communication, as well as the communication throughout the project, and then follow up afterwards. And I think the other thing, and I heard this from somebody else recently on a YouTube, and I can't remember who they is, so I can't take credit necessarily, but it's something I do as well. And that is doing one thing extra for the customer that maybe they weren't expecting. And nothing like extravagant, you know, crazy, but like they might have mentioned, oh man, you know, I wish you could knock that little hump down, or there's this little problem spot in the yard, and they may not ask you to directly take care of it, but they are asking you to take care of it, and you just take care of it, you know, and say, hey, you know, I went ahead and took care of that problem spot for you. No extra charge or anything. You don't even have to drop that, you know, but like, something like that helps them think, wow, that guy or whoever, they took the time to actually they were listening to what I said, and they actually did something with that. So I think that's been helpful. So yeah, I think switching gears a little bit. All right, well, I think the first part of this was kind of like, you know, getting down and deep, but anyway, and this is going to be kind of a short session, but I got two other questions. And really, one was, you know, what's the first piece of equipment that you would buy if you're doing it all over again? And I don't know, I think this is a wide variety of answers probably too, but I still think the skid steer compact track loader is probably the first piece of equipment I buy. The reason I say is because it's just so versatile. You can do all kinds of stuff from, you know, obviously grading. You can get a dozer blade, rollers, soil conditioners, post hole diggers. I mean, the sky's the limit on the stuff you can do, and you can get into the business fairly quickly. You know, I think you can do a lot with an excavator. However, it's limited in its capability because you pretty much need both of those on each project, especially if you're talking about moving a lot of soils. You know, like, you know, driveways or grading or that kind of thing. You can do it with a dozer blade. Kubota's got an awesome little 6-way dozer blade. For their little compact, not compact loaders, they're excavators. So that's pretty slick. But I still think the compact track loader, the thing I would say about that though is, like, I made a mistake and I bought a smaller than what I I didn't need it at the time. It was the perfect size for what I needed at the time, but as the business was growing, I needed something that I could eventually put into a big dump truck. And I end up, didn't have the machine to do it. And so I was really at a disadvantage on loading out big 6 and 7 axle trucks because I couldn't reach the top to dump material in there. So I had to have an excavator there or have to rent another machine. So I'd buy a skid steer that at least can load dump trucks. So it can lift 11, 12 foot in the air. And you may not need it for right now, but it's one thing that I would probably consider or do if I was doing it again. So, and then the last thing is, what's my favorite machine to operate? Well, I mean, I haven't operated every single thing, so I'll go with what I currently have. And my favorite's the dozer. By far, it is the piece of equipment that I think, and I tell people I run into, it's the easiest to run, but the hardest to be good at. And what I mean by that is anybody can kind of just push out dirt, but to grade without a GPS, just manual hand controls, and go out there and grade, you'll hear it all the time. You feel it in your butt, right? You feel it up in the ups and downs. And to be accurate, good, and can grade, and that's just, I'm kind of that way. I like to master things, and so I'm no master at at running the dozer, but I'm pretty good at it, I think. And I'm so glad I didn't get like one that was, GPS enabled already and had blade control, because that would have been something that I would have been a disadvantage if I didn't have that. So, and I had to go do a job. So that's my favorite, because the other part of it is you can just move so much of you can make such a difference in a short amount of time by moving the dirt, changing grade, all kinds of stuff. And so I really think that's probably my favorite machine. All right, well, I've babbled on far enough. I don't have any more specific questions, so I appreciate the questions on Facebook. Like I said, some of these came from Facebook and not YouTube, but hey, I'm just going to throw them on YouTube. But I just thought I'd end with this. I appreciate the new subscribers. I know the constant feedback I continue to get is, let's see more work in real time, rather than, the time lapse. And it's funny because I'll tell my wife, I'll be like, I don't know why people want to watch somebody else do work, in real time for an hour, but, I get it. Sometimes some people just like to see what's happening and how it played out and how the job actually played out. So, trying to do a little bit more of that, as well as still do time lapse, because at some point, you've got to get kind of the video to a realistic watchability time frame. And so, to do an 8-hour job, and I know there's some great YouTube creators out there that do a good job, and some of their long formats are 50 minutes, or an hour. And I certainly could do that too. And maybe I will tinker with one of those, projects that, that makes sense and it's kind of cool. Maybe I do a long format type video, but anyway, I'm trying. But anyway, I appreciate the subscribers, the interest in the channel, and I'll try to do better at the videoing real time. And certainly if there's questions, comments, any additional things I can answer, I'd love to jump in here. Transparency and how things are going. I think, I work with some other excavators in the area. Hey, I like to share what I am learning and knowledge I have. I think that's just who I am. And so if you have questions, you're in my area, want to meet up, chat, hey, let's do it. Do a job together. That'd be fun. But anyway, I appreciate it, and thanks for tuning in.